Where are you from?
I'm from Korea.
India.
Bangladesh.
Thailand.
China.
Malaysia.
Cambodia.
Myanmar. Mongolia.
The Philippines.
Taiwan.
Indonesia.
Hong Kong. Sri Lanka.
Vietnam.
Japan.
So I guess firstly, what does being Asian mean to you?
Well,
it's part of my identity, I guess. But I guess being in New Zealand has made me want to be something else rather than like being who I actually am.
being Asian means so many things. It literally shapes your whole life. And I'm sure other cultures have, their cultural identity as well. But specifically being Asian, born in New Zealand, all the while keeping a very traditional Korean lifestyle at home has been quite a challenge.
It just means that I'm different. I think there was a lot of struggle to get out of India and get to here, so I could live the life that I'm living right now. It means that I have a culture. I grew up in a very traditional family. My grandfather came from northern China to Taiwan. He was 14 when he was fighting a war. So I'm very lucky to be born here because, back then it was really rough. There was a lot of violence and warfare.
But growing up in a Western country, it was kind of like I had two lives, like Hannah Montana. So, like, I had two sets of friends, I learned two different languages.
My mum's side is Indonesian, so they all live in Indonesia or they live in Australia, Melbourne. I don't have anyone on my mum's side living here, so I do feel a bit detached from my culture just because I've been born and raised in such a Western culture. So being part of like my Asian family, like when I'm with them, I'm kind of like the outsider.
Growing up Asian in a Western society has really meant that I pretty much have two lives. One at home, where I experience a traditional family-like culture, and outside with all my friends and the rest of society.
To me, I think that being Asian is an important part of my genetic identity, but not necessarily the most important thing of my whole identity. I moved here when I was 5 years old with my family, so even though I had the language, I had the Mongolian language and I had the ability to speak it, I wasn't yet fully ingrained in sort of the tradition and the history and the culture of Mongolia.
I never really considered myself to be Asian because obviously the stereotype of being Asian is not really directed towards my culture.
It means a lot of things. Being Asian means obviously that you're really different from others, especially in here.
I feel that being Asian in New Zealand means immediately being recognized for being different from your peers, Like, just looking at you, you can already tell that you're different. You're judged as being Asian rather than as a true Kiwi.
So, growing up Asian has taught me to remain steadfast all the way by always holding that pride and loyalty for your culture, no matter what anybody says or thinks about it, no matter how different you think you may look or feel in comparison to others. It's all about staying true to yourself and where you come from.
So I have a lot of Western friends, and for me to be Asian, I don't want to say I stood out, but I brought something different to the table. That's what it means to me.
Growing up Indian, there were a lot of stereotypes, especially, things to do with curry or, random stuff like that. But generally, I just tended to ignore them because I didn't really care, to be honest.
I get the saying that I'm very whitewashed, and I think it's because I used to not be proud of my culture. And when I was younger, I went to Chinese school and I didn't really pay much attention there, and now I regret not learning it better. But I think just trying to fit in, I've been accustomed to all these European traditions that have made me whitewashed when I should be really proud of my own culture instead of adapting to the westernized culture.
Growing up, I grew up with a lot of islanders because being in a islander area, my parents took me to an islander school. Yeah, growing up definitely, I had to kind of hold back my Asian side because I felt like I was gonna be judged of the way I talk and the way I act, because at home I'm different to how I am at school. I feel like there's like a certain way you need to act for you to be accepted. But that was just me growing up. But like as I grew up and I got older, like I got close with these people, so it was like all good to like, you know, act like how I wanted to be.
Back in primary school, it didn't really bother me, but then as soon as I started college, we were playing like human bingo, and so they were asking where everyone came from, and so I wrote down, you know, everyone was asking. I was like, oh, like I speak Thai, so I guess come from Thailand. And then like all of a sudden, this one dude, he just shouted out, he was like, oh, that means you're a lady boy, and I was like, no, and I don't know. That's when it like kind of like I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay, is that really what people think about Thai people?
The most stereotypical one was being good at math, and you know, especially because with Asian parents, they kind of bring you up to be more academic rather than more physically proficient. So I actually ended up being pretty decent at it, and in school and stuff, I would get, you know, mocked for being good at math, having small eyes, having a slight accent, and yeah, just minor things like that. Back then, when I was younger, it kind of just hit me and it rubbed me in the wrong way, and I felt hurt and, you know, degraded. Especially being brought up in a Western society since I was quite young, you would kind of think that they would have learned to accept multicultural people and not make fun of them and joke about them.
I didn't experience the typical having really strict parents, you know, having them dictate my childhood, etc. But I feel like because of where I went to school, my friends, the general vibe and atmosphere I was living in, even like just the culture I experienced, I felt like I still slowly just adopted the, you know, the stigma around being an Asian guy.
When I was growing up in year 9, probably that was the most like that was the period where all the racial stereotypes came in. It kind of like brings you down. You know, you go like, oh, I mean, it's not true, but it hurts as well sometimes.
With stereotypes, you know how just because you look Asian, people expect you to be really good at school. Like they'd be like, oh, I bet you studied every weekend before the test, or like you're always going to get a good grade, you know, because you're Asian. And it's like, I mean, I never think about it, you know, like I'm just off doing my own thing, and when somebody says that, I notice it a lot.
So being Japanese, I feel like Japanese culture is one of the most exposed Asian cultures in Western society. So there's a lot of cultural stereotype that has been risen out of it, such obvious ones such as like anime, being a ninja, you know, all that type of stuff. And to me, I don't mind it because it doesn't really affect me at all. I know who I am, so I don't need to abide to it.
I think a lot of people associate like all the countries in like Asia as like one, like under like, oh, it's China or like Malaysia or like Thailand, but like there's so many other like Asian countries in that continent. Like there's Indonesia, there's Vietnam, there's, you know, there's Cambodia, but they all assume it's all one. And so whenever anyone asks and I said, oh, Indonesia, they're kind of like, is that Malaysia or is that Thailand? It's like, no, it's a whole different country. I am half caste, so I wasn't the main focus of attention when it came to racial jokes or like, you know, just teasing. I wasn't the main target, but I know people who have been targeted for being Asian and have been like made fun of and stuff. But so I guess being half white kind of put like a weird like fence around me.
I feel that I was kind of blind to the prejudice that I was receiving, but it became really apparent last year. My cousins from Malaysia actually came over and we traveled to the South Island, and that was when we experienced like a lot of racism. Like people actually were spitting on us from food courts, you know, and I think that's because the South Island is kind of a very homogenous culture. It's not as multicultural as say Auckland. In Auckland, I had never really experienced something like that, especially living in East Auckland, where there's a lot of Asians. Just being in the South Island really opened up my eyes to, you know, just because my cousins had such a strong Malaysian accent, they were immediately treated differently compared to me, you know.
Being Sri Lankan, the classic stereotype I'd probably face is Indian, and since I got brown skin, black hair, I'm Indian. I guess that's what people thought. But explaining to people that like where Sri Lanka was and how the culture differs was quite interesting to see people's reaction and how people would like go to then understand that not everyone is who they look like they are.
Hi, I'm Celine. Thank you so much for watching this section of my documentary. As a creator, it means a lot to me to be able to share the stories of the faces that Western media doesn't get to see very often. And as you've heard from all of my friends, discovering our Asian identity has been far from easy and has seen us all confronted with many different challenges that have inevitably shaped us into the people we are today. So please make sure you check out the other sections of this very amateur documentary and keep being proud to be Asian. Yeah. See ya.